how cold the air can be, how he can be lost so quickly through the window of opportunity, just like a draft in the night. See how words can twist and hands can ring like phones inside empty homes when nobody's there to hear. Oh, do you hear me, dear?
Hi, you guys. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio. Nice to see you back again. And we have another super exciting show with a friend of ours that I met in person a few years ago named Ananda More. And this is a filmmaker that created a great movie called Magic Pills that I was fortunate to get to go to a screening of a few years back when it was just starting out. And it's about homeopathy kind of from the bottom up, a little bit about its history, how it's used now, especially in countries where it's really popular and has been for a long time. Like I remember footage in India, but also people in the UK that were doing amazing things with it, and even talking about some of the education that practitioners went through. I just want to share that with you, especially it's relevant now, not only because it can be used for all kinds of things, besides what we can actually mention specifically on the broadcast, but also because it's under fire, and the medical authorities and government authorities in a lot of places, including where I'm sitting now in the U.S. and in Canada and other places, would really like to get rid of it because it's a kind of like another option that might lead people away from total dependence on allopathic medicine. And they have a hard time getting rid of it because, first of all, they complain and say, well, it isn't anything. It doesn't do anything. It has nothing in it. It's a bunch of water. Be careful because it doesn't do anything and it will never do anything. And then they say, well, it's so dangerous that it might kill you. And they get reminded, oh, you just said it doesn't do anything. So I think they're still trying to figure out that little challenge. But while they're trying to figure it out and we still have it available, it would be nice for all of you to know more about where it came from, what it's about. And I thought the way to start with that, since we've got Ananda here as a, central figure in the film and getting it all together and arranging all these different people to contribute their experiences to it. Let's start out with where she came from before she knew about homeopathy. And Ananda, if you're willing to talk about that, take it back as far as you want to the life you came from before awareness of it at all, why you got interested, how it evolved up there, how you became a person making a movie about it. And then let's talk about the applications in the present and interesting historical things, whatever we have time to get into. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Richard. Yeah, it's nice to be given the space to really explore it from a deeper level. So thank you.
And you
for
can
that.
correct anything I said that needs correction in the introduction. You're free to do whatever.
Okay. I'm sure stuff will come up as we're talking. And you referred to the fact that homeopathy is really under threat, particularly in the States right now.
Right.
And we know that whatever happens in the States quickly follows suits in other countries. Mm-hmm. The FDA has developed or created a draft guidance document that, for all intents and purposes, makes homeopathy illegal. Basically demanding that homeopathic remedies go through the new drug, the registration process, which can cause...
So you're free to do that as long as you spend $20 million per different formula, right? Something
exactly,
like
or per remedy.
Yeah.
And, what's special and unique about homeopathy is that often the way it's most commonly used requires a level of individualization and customization. So it isn't that one remedy is good for everybody's flu. We take the symptom picture of a person into account and then prescribe on that. So when we try to go into trial, there's many ways to make a trial work, but the FDA wants to show that X drug is good for X condition, where taking the person completely out of it and the individualization of that person's, biome, how they're...
So you fall into that trap as soon as you agree to call it a drug, right?
Correct. Yeah, and it works on a completely different paradigm.
Yeah.
So where we do have a lot of randomized controlled trials, clinical trials that show homeopathy works, those generally involve individualization and actual proper case taking, and then prescribing the indicated remedy as opposed to one size fits all solution.
So the practitioner is really an essential part of it, right? You can't just say, if you're in this condition, always use this particular remedy. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't generally work like that. There are exceptions to the rule. And it is possible for people to learn basic skills so they can prescribe for themselves at home by having a basic understanding of some remedies.
Okay.
But, from a complex...
So before we get too far into that,
we'll go
I want to go back to where you didn't know about it. And what changed? Why did you decide to get into it? Yeah.
I was in university the first time I heard about homeopathy. And I was studying drama and religious studies at the University of Alberta. And I was doing a course called Witchcraft and the Occult. And I've always been interested in occult and energy and magic. And then I really became interested in spirituality and religions like Buddhism and Taoism. And so I really entered that field with an open heart. But in this course on witchcraft and the occult, we studied all about homeopathy, which just
doesn't sound very evil. It's really, when you talk about the word witchcraft, most people get really terrified or angry because they think it's got to be something really bad. But the thing is that if you remember back to when they were burning the practitioners of witchcraft in Salem and areas around there, those witchcraft people were guilty of herbalism and midwifery and things like that was the evil they were doing. So words carry a connotation that's not always accurate, right?
Correct.
You weren't studying how to be terrible and hurt people.
No, and it was an academic study of the history of Wicca, of different ideas around pagan religions, and but there was a skeptical undertone to the course. One of our key textbooks was called How to Think About Strange Things. And now, there's skeptical, and then there's what I call like the career skeptics, the professional skeptics, whose job it is to debunk everyone and everything. Yeah. In the name of a very materialistic science.
You can get paid really well for doing that online right now. And just debunk everything you're told to debunk.
Exactly. So I learned about homeopathy within that context. And just to give your listeners an understanding of what homeopathy is, it's a form of medicine. And what makes it so controversial is that we take a substance through a process of dilution and what we call succussion. And succussion means shaking the vial containing the solution.
What's that word, succussion?
Succussion.
How do you spell it?
Succussion.
Okay, I never heard it before. I was just interested.
I think it's a specific word to homeopathy. So I haven't heard of it in another context.
What does it actually mean? Is it a certain kind of shaking that you do?
When Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, what he would do is he had a Bible, and he would take the vial that he was succussing in his hand and just slam it down on the Bible. Now we have machines that do it. Okay. And the machines all have their own way of doing it, but it's a very important step. And without that, a homeopathic remedy does not become a remedy. So What we do is we take a substance, we dilute it in water, and then shake it up, and then you go through a process of serial dilution. So you take a drop from that container, you just put through that process, put it in the next vial, shake it up again, and you can do that hundreds of times. You can do that 2 times, you can do that 100 times. It depends on the potency of the medication you want to make. And so from an initial chemical perspective, looking at Avogadro's number, which is a number that delineates how much dilution you can have before you have none of the original material left in that solution, we go way beyond that. And it just, from a first look, it doesn't make any sense. There's nothing in your water. You're giving people placebo. And so it shouldn't work. And when I learned about this at that point, I was really shocked by how gullible people could be to believe in this. Right. And I totally believed in energy medicine. I was very curious about Chinese medicine, acupuncture, all these alternative ways of thinking. But homeopathy, I had my limits, and homeopathy was definitely one of them.
Well, and that was the FDA's first argument. There's nothing in these remedies, so they're all fraud. That was before they decided to say how dangerous it was.
Well, actually, way, way back, the person who founded the FDA, the senator who introduced that bill, was a homeopath.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
It's very interesting. And homeopathy was grandfathered in as a safe medicine that's free of risk. And because of those 2 points, it should not need to go through the new drug application process.
What year did he start the FDA?
Because there's no... I don't recall. I'd have to look at that. I did used to know the date.
Okay, it was in the 1900s, I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I was just thinking it's too bad he's not around to comment on the attacks that are going on now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, the FDA was formed to protect people from things that could cause harm, and homeopathy is completely non-toxic. Wow. So it's like, trying
so he was planning to protect people from things that were not homeopathy, basically, right?
Correct.
That were made out of poisons and stuff like that.
Yeah. And to make sure that the food, the things that people were consuming were produced in a safe manner, and that the medicines being made for people were produced and developed and were safe. And the risks were understood.
Yeah, it's really not a bad idea.
No, in essence, it's not a bad idea. And until now, the FDA had an excellent method of regulating homeopathy, in that pharmacies had to maintain specific standards from the homeopathic pharmacopoeia, which gives you strict instructions on how every remedy must be produced. And that also helps protect the public from knowing that what they're buying is actually what we're told is in that vial.
Okay.
So, some people started taking advantage of that, some companies, and labeling their products as homeopathic when they weren't, to be able to sidestep FDA regulation. So that's a concern, and there were things in place to protect that, but they rarely followed up on them. Rarely policed it.
If the idea is that what you said just before my questions, that the dilution proceeds in generally, though the number of times it gets diluted varies, in general, it proceeds far enough so that physically you couldn't find any residue of the original substance.
Except that we do find residue of the original substance.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask you about, is if it doesn't have anything, how can it do anything?
Right. So I'll talk about what we are finding now, but in a second. But the idea that we're understanding, and that there's a lot of science showing this, is that water can hold information. And through the succussion, we're creating nanoparticles of silica, which is a conductor, and the silica is from the glass container. We're also creating nanobubbles and creating very, very high temperatures for very brief periods of time. So there's almost some kind of alchemy happening in that vial. We have many studies showing that you can actually tell the difference between a homeopathic dilution and just ordinary water, and just a control. There's been research done with what are called polar dyes, which will dye a substance according to its magnetic field. And homeopathic remedies will respond to that, where water won't, for example. There's people who've done work, for example, in vitro with cancer cells, and can tell when a remedy at what potency will have an effect on those cells, and the control will never have an effect on those cells. So there's theories around, is it nanobubbles that are holding the information? Are there quantum domains that are being formed in the water? There's a physicist named Alex Tournier who's doing that research. There's all kinds of people working to try to understand the mechanism, but there's not enough money available for that research. It's hard to find.
Did you hear of the movie, the water movie by Emoto, the guy in Japan that did the experiment with the freezing?
Yeah, and
kind of related to that, right? Because that was holding information from the projection of love or hate or indifference.
It's very related. It's very related because you see those patterns, and those patterns aren't just coming from people's energy, but every substance has its own signature and its own energy. And when you put it through that homeopathic process of what we call potentization, the succussion and the dilution, you're extracting that deeper essence of the substance and bringing it into a pattern in the water. And that communicates with our bodies.
Okay.
But the other very interesting thing, and we highlight this in the film, is that we actually do see nanoparticles of source material at very high dilutions. Where we should see nothing. And this work has been replicated dozens of times in labs all around the world using an electron microscope. So there is something there. And why is that? And how is it that there's still nanoparticles present no matter what the potency? We can't explain.
So Avogadro was wrong, you think?
I don't know if Avogadro was wrong, but maybe Luc Montagnier was right.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is Luc has done work with, he won the Nobel Prize for discovering the HIV virus. And he's done a lot of very interesting work with HIV and I feel like I'm going to sound ludicrous talking about it, but basically being able to transmit the information for the genetic material of the HIV virus through homeopathic dilution, and then hitting it with a recorded electromagnetic field from the HIV itself. So we know very little about water. Water is this big scientific mystery, and it's its own field in physics, because water seems to defy, many laws of physics, and we're still trying to understand why that is and what's so special about it.
It's the only liquid that we know of that expands when you freeze it, for one thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's supposed to do the opposite.
So it's an enigmatic substance, and we still know so little about it.
So you got interested from the courses at the university that
I actually became appalled, and I had zero interest in homeopathy, and I was a profound skeptic. And then I went trekking in Nepal after graduating from university. I did the Annapurna circuit and ended up with a herniated disc from the trek. And I spent some time in the hospital then in India, in Varanasi. And my insurance company wanted to send me home, and people kept telling me, oh, you must try homeopathy. It's the best medicine. It's cheap. Because in India, it's very popular. It's part of the regular healthcare system. And I just kept saying, don't be ridiculous. But I went and did Reiki, I did Ayurveda, I did every other kind of natural medicine, and just completely stumped my nose at homeopathy.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, I was backpacking in this place called Hampi with this German girl. And she was traveling with a homeopathic kit that her mom had given her. And one morning I woke up really sick, diarrhea, vomiting, and she pulled out these little sugar pills, popped them in my mouth, and lo and behold, I felt better. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that had happened.
It wasn't a placebo because you were sure it wouldn't work, right?
I was really sure it wouldn't work. I was appeasing her and humoring her by taking her little sugar pills.
Right.
I didn't think they would hurt me. And after that, a little while later, I met a girl who was working as a receptionist for a homeopath. And I decided to go and try it out. And it helped me so much. I had been dealing... Was that
in India also? Or
I was still in India, yeah. Okay. It helped me, it really cleared a lifelong depression that I had for as long as I can remember. Wow. And I think it came from my mother. I inherited it. And it changed my life completely. And I was on my way to law school at that time. And it just impacted me so strongly, and I wanted to help other people in the same way. And at that point, I changed my mind and decided to go study homeopathy.
Where?
So I ended up coming back to Canada, and I moved to Toronto. It was the best program I could find in Canada, where it felt like a really complete education. And it's difficult when, at that point, homeopathy wasn't regulated. And here in Ontario, where I live, homeopathy is now a regulated health profession. But finding a good program was difficult because there were no standards.
Right.
So it took me some time to find somewhere where I felt I was going to get the medical sciences and the homeopathy. And I studied for 3 years, traveled to India, learned with some teachers there. Homeopathy is this continuous study of life in general, and so you're always learning.
Yeah.
And at one point I was at a conference, and this man, Dr. Gustavo Bracho, who's a renowned immunologist, he's developed several vaccines. He is really recognized for his knowledge of vaccine adjuvants. And he works for a pharmaceutical company, or he worked for a pharmaceutical company in Cuba called the Finley Institute, that was created by Fidel Castro to prevent disease. That was the raison d'etre of this institute. But that also means in Cuba, it wasn't a private company. It was a company owned by the state, which means that it wasn't out for profit, and it completely changes the outlook of that pharmaceutical and what they're willing to experiment with and what they're willing to do.
Right.
So they were faced with an epidemic in Cuba of this disease called leptospirosis in 2007. And this is the only pharmacy in the world that makes the human vaccine for this disease, which has a mortality rate of up to 10%. And just to relate that to COVID's, from 0.03 to 0.1% of, mortality rate.
Yeah.
They did not have enough vaccine for the population at this point that this epidemic was starting. And so they decided to experiment with homeopathy. And they made a homeopathic remedy, got it to 2.5 million people in a matter of 2 weeks. And the rates of this disease, leptospirosis, dropped below historical rates of the disease in the country. And it held that way. The following year, there were hurricanes that hit the entire country. They only did this intervention in 3 provinces in the eastern part of the country.
They had a control automatically then. Huh?
Exactly. And this disease is spread through stagnant water, which happens when there's hurricanes.
Okay.
So the following year, these hurricanes, the worst year on record for hurricanes in Cuba. The entire country is affected. And the part of Cuba that did not receive the intervention had like a 28% increase in the rates of leptospirosis, and the rest of the country had an over 80% decrease.
Is this a parasite that comes out of the water?
It's a spirochete bacteria, similar, like related to, for example, Lyme disease.
Okay.
And it's similar, and like it's very hard to diagnose because it has a very generalized picture.
Yeah.
With fevers and hemorrhaging. So it can look like dengue. It can look like all kinds of different diseases.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're describing the control versus what the other
right.
are doing.
And when they went to publish what had happened, they were shocked when all the mainstream journals refused to publish their research because they had never come across this.
Right.
And they didn't understand the influence of the pharmaceutical industry on medical journals. And when they finally did have it published in a homeopathic journal, Dr. Bracha told me that he had hundreds of death threats coming through his email and that they were calling him a bioterrorist. But he presented all this research at this conference I attended. And I thought to myself, no one is ever going to hear about this outside of the homeopathic community. And this is so important. This is life-changing information.
Well, you're talking about a vaccine with no negative effects.
Yeah.
That's essentially unheard of. I mean, most of them damage or kill people, and that's not just the adjuvants that do it a lot. It's been happening since Jenner started it.
Yeah, well, I'm legally not allowed to have an opinion on vaccines.
Well, this can be blamed on me. I'm just...
so I won't comment
I'll be the crazy
with agreement
person.
or disagreement with what you're saying.
But I think you can agree with the part where this kind of immunization using homeopathy, if it actually works, is spectacular because it doesn't hurt anybody.
Correct.
Right? And if it also works, that's incredible, especially since it has, in most people's opinion, nothing in it.
Yep.
Pretty interesting.
It's so I think it's very threatening on that level to the pharmaceutical system.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key reasons we've seen such an increase in the attack against homeopathy.
Right. So you happened to get into that conference, and that was in Cuba?
No, that was in Toronto.
Toronto, okay. But some of the people from Cuba came there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then that affected your plans for the future?
Well, I had I just wanted to disseminate this. I wanted people to know that we had real strong evidence, one, that homeopathy works, but two, that this could be, if this, what we call homeoprophylaxis works, it could be life-changing.
It could be world-changing.
It could be world-changing.
Yeah. One question before you go further, if you don't lose your train of thought, but when they're making I'm not going to call it a vaccine because there's no needles involved. You're not injecting it into anybody. When they make this, can you call it an immunization, or what would you call it?
We call it homeoprophylaxis.
Okay, when they make this homeoprophylaxis, which effectively actually does appear to immunize people in these situations, do you understand how they choose what to put in that mixture?
Yes.
Right. That would be a really interesting thing to get to at the right time.
Yeah, so I'm happy to go there right now. What the Finley Institute the Finley Institute used is something that we call a nosode, which is a homeopathic remedy produced from bacteria, virus, or pathogen.
Okay, so you could give the example of this particular epidemic you were looking at, because you know the name of the organism that is supposedly the main element in it. So if they had an epidemic like that, how do they decide from that what to do?
So actually, I can tell you what Cuba is doing right now, which they looked at remedies that cover, which is different from what they did with the leptospirosis. They're two different things.
Okay.
So what they have formulated now is a combination of remedies that address the symptom picture of the disease.
You better kind of explain what that means.
Yeah. So when we prescribe a homeopathic remedy, we want to understand what symptoms you're experiencing.
Okay.
So we believe in our basic tenet is that like cures like. So for example, if someone has allergies, their eyes are tearing, their nose is kind of burny, we might consider something like onion, which the remedy we call Allium cepa is made from onion, to help treat their allergies, because an onion would create similar symptoms.
So you don't choose the thing they're allergic to necessarily. You
Not
choose
necessarily.
something else that does the same symptoms, kind of.
Right. So we can go either way. What's called isopathy is using the exact same thing. So if you're experiencing allergies and they're because of birch pollen, you can give the person birch pollen homeopathically, and that can help the situation as well. Or you can go for something that would create a similar set of symptoms.
And how do you decide which one of those is appropriate?
Traditionally, homeopathy is about using something that's similar. And when we started using these nosodes and the exact pathogen or the exact irritant, that we start calling isopathy. And that's up to a practitioner, and it's up to knowing as well. Like, you may or may not know what is causing the problem.
But you think they both work pretty much equally?
I think they both have their place, and sometimes one is better than the other, or they can work in synchronicity. So
it's kind of a subtle thing that the practitioner has to learn to tell which one is appropriate for what
is appropriate. Situation. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So right now, in the first time with the leptospirosis epidemic in Cuba, they isolated the bacteria because they have the labs and the equipment to do that. They're a vaccine facility.
Right.
And they made a homeopathic remedy from it.
And that's by putting a sample of the bacteria in water, right?
Yeah.
And then diluting it a huge number of times
so that
so that at that point, and so that you can't find the bacteria in the end product.
Right, exactly.
But there's something there that's really
something
important.
There.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And what they've done now is they've looked at the symptom picture of the disease that we're dealing with and said, oh, these are some interesting symptoms, like this is the kind of fever a person gets, these are the neurological symptoms that seem to be happening, these are the respiratory symptoms that seem to be happening. What homeopathic remedies fit that symptom picture, that state? And they chose several remedies that they believe are a close fit.
And each one of those remedies had been formulated by one of the two tracks that you talked about, right?
So that was the homeopathic pharmacy. So for example, there's a remedy called arsenicum album, which is often used by homeopaths for the flu. And it's very restless at night. We have symptoms of restlessness, thirst, aggravations in the evening, a lot of respiratory distress. We have I'm trying to remember of other remedies like gelsemium, which become very exhausted and drained, dizzy. So they look at the key aspects of a remedy symptom picture and match that to the disease picture in the patient.
Okay, so the question I have, since it's based on the symptom picture, is it possible to get rid of the symptoms and not the underlying cause and miss it? Or, in other words, do you have to get rid of the cause, or is getting rid of the symptoms good enough?
We tend to think we're actually addressing the cause.
Okay.
Because when we're looking at deeper pathologies and chronic illness, what we're doing is teaching, I mean, this is how I perceive it. We're teaching the immune system a specific pattern, and which is the same pattern as that pathology is producing. And as that pattern is recognized by the immune system can fight back. It sounds very esoteric in that way.
Well, I mean, the main thing is it seems to actually work.
Yes, it does. So it's almost like we're educating the immune system to respond at a very deep level.
Right.
So the goal is not to suppress. Sorry?
Okay. That's the whole idea of real immunization.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and we know the effects of long-term suppression.
Yeah, it's got to come out in some other form if you do that.
Yeah, so in homeopathic philosophy, we believe in the law of cure, which states that disease moves from more vital organs to less vital organs, from the bottom up and from the inside out. And also chronologically. So, for example, we may see a patient who had eczema as a child, was given cortisone, and then later develops asthma. And according to homeopathic philosophy, it was the cortisone suppressed the eczema, driving the disease deeper into the organism, and then yielding asthma. So were we to treat that, we would think of a successful treatment to follow as the asthma starts to heal, that we would see the eczema return.
So you focus on the most recent symptomatology first, and then the other is expected to show up after you get rid of it?
We consider it all together because they're all part of that same pattern of expression of the body.
All right.
But we would be happy if we saw old pathology returning and then clearing.
Right. And so this is part of the patient history that the practitioner needs to take, right? To
right,
understand.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we're at the point where you became aware of the meeting and you were in it and you thought this has to be shared with the public.
Yeah.
And what happened?
And I feel like the idea of making a film kind of just settled itself into my mind.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't know how to make films yet, right?
No, I had a degree in drama, so I felt I knew about storytelling, but I didn't realize how different, because all the work I had done had been for the stage. It was a very different process to produce a film. And I didn't realize how different a process that would be going into it. But I did some film programs. I learned a whole bunch of stuff over 8 years. And I learned a lot just being out there and doing it and working with excellent people who came along for the ride on this project. But yeah, it was, I feel like I got a degree in filmmaking by making this film, for sure.
Right. So what kind of process, what were the steps involved to get the film created? What did you have to do, basically?
Well, in my, when I first had this idea, a friend of mine connected me with someone who just graduated from film school, and we got a camera, went to Cuba, and just started filming. It was, kind of naive in the way it was done, but we got interviews, we got lots of great information. We found someone who helped us organize things in Cuba and got us around. I was very grateful to him. And it was after that I actually started doing some directing courses, editing courses, cinematography courses. So I slowly started learning more about the craft itself.
Yeah.
And then I went back to Cuba with a more seasoned cinematographer, and got a sound crew, and it was a totally different thing this time. I think the footage that we got was there was a lot more depth and quality to the work that occurred then. And that just built and continued, and we went and filmed in Tanzania, and we filmed in India and in Europe. And it was, it's incredible what two people can create with the technology that we have available today.
Yeah, I remember seeing the case studies in the movie. Was great. Are there any that are right in your mind that you could share to give people a feeling without seeing the movie at the moment of what it feels like to watch it? What kind of interviews you're showing, and what experiences are people sharing? Just any samples of that to give people a feel for the next best thing to watching it.
Yeah, well, hopefully they'll want to watch it. It's available online now.
Exactly. We're going to get to that too.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I get so much different feedback from different people telling me that different parts of the film were their favorite or spoke to them powerfully. But the premise of the film is starting with the media and looking at the portrayal that the mainstream media, the narrative that they have created around homeopathy and this notion that it's unscientific.
Yeah, this was from before people discovered real science, right? They did witchcraft like homeopathy, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Superstition. Yeah.
And, I had the experience of being misquoted and basically lied about in a journal here in Toronto called The Walrus, which is a very highly respected magazine. It's very long-form journalism. It's similar to Harper's in the U.S., not Harper's Bazaar, the fashion magazine, but Harper's, a more academic, political magazine.
Okay.
And I gave them studies and evidence, and they outright lied, just completely fibbed in the article, saying that none of the research I had given them had been published in peer-reviewed journals.
Yeah. When
I had given them the actual article and the references and everything for them to look at it in the journal itself.
Wow.
And when I confronted them about that, they said, well, this is our genre. We do these things in order to create the story we want to create. And actually, none of these studies, one of them including what had happened in Cuba, were randomized controlled trials. So therefore, no scientific journal would ever publish this, which is just wrong. There are so many different kinds of studies out in the world, and they all have their validity, and we need all kinds of studies to give us a complete picture, because even double-blind randomized controlled trials have their limitations, and those are recognized.
Right.
And so we need different kinds of knowledge, and they're all scientifically valid. And I realized that these people who are the gatekeepers to the knowledge of the world, and who are telling people how to think about science, have zero scientific training and don't understand it themselves. And they're the ones telling the general public how to think about science and what is right and wrong.
Right.
So to me, that kind of leads the whole story of, are they right? And what does the actual scientific literature say? And what do the actual stories out in the world of large-scale homeopathic interventions actually say? And that leads me on the trip to Cuba, where, we talked about what had happened there with the leptospirosis epidemic. But I also go to Tanzania, where an organization called Homeopathy for Health in Africa is doing research and working with HIV and AIDS patients. And what's remarkable about the work that they're doing is they're working primarily with AIDS widows. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's become such a huge discrimination against these women, because they are blamed for giving HIV to their husbands.
Wow.
When their husbands die, they're just like communicated from their families. Everything's taken away from them, and they're left alone, without work, ill, and with their children, trying to raise these children. And these are the kind of people that Homeopathy for Health in Africa is helping. And they have the blood work, they're working, like, so in the film, we see these cases of these women coming in, telling their stories of how they couldn't work, they were so ill, and they start these homeopathic remedies, and their lives change.
So in other words, the women had HIV too?
Yeah, so their husbands gave them HIV.
Okay.
Had the husbands die, leave them with a disease, and yeah. So it's life-changing, and they're working with hospitals in Tanzania. And the hospitals themselves, all the doctors there have started referring their patients to this project. And they're working hand in hand with the homeopaths. Many have become patients of the homeopaths. And the director of one of these hospitals, I got to interview him. He became so enamored with what he was seeing that he decided to become a homeopath himself.
Wow. Sounds like they're way more advanced than the US and Canada, basically.
Well, it's a different culture, so they're a lot more open, and they're not threatened by seeing other ways of doing things.
Yeah. So they must have had an interest in more people in Tanzania becoming homeopaths, right?
Yeah, and there's a school in Kenya, and people who have come and worked for Homeopathy for Health in Africa have been, the organization has paid for their tuition in Kenya, and then they come back to Tanzania and they work with the organization. It's very cool.
Wow, nice.
And they're training people to become teachers as well, so that they themselves can continue the tradition.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great story.
Another one of the stories we tell is in Calcutta in India, where this father and son duo called the Banerjees
what was it called?
The Banerjees. So it's
Okay.
Prateep and Prasanta Banerjee.
Okay.
And they have created protocols using homeopathy to treat all kinds of diseases, but they've become very well known for their work with brain tumors. And they have been very, very effective at treating brain tumors, where allopathic medicine has a ridiculously low success rate.
Yeah.
With the average life expectancy of someone with a brain tumor of about 5 years. So the work that the Banerjees see thousands of people a day. People come from all over Asia, line up at their doors.
Wow.
They've trained a bunch of doctors to work in their clinic,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't charge people for the care.
Wow. Are they running on
for the medicine.
donations, basically?
So the Banerjees themselves will charge patients, but you can come to the clinic and be seen by one of the other doctors for free. So they run on the sale of remedies, which are also very, very, very cheap.
Yeah.
And donations. And I think just by the numbers of people that are coming through the clinic, it's enough for them to be self-sustaining, really.
Okay. Right.
And they keep meticulous data of every patient that comes through those doors. So they can mine that data and see the kinds of results that they're getting.
Right.
So again, not a randomized controlled trial, but when 80% of your patients aren't dying and are actually, many of them are actually improving significantly, that's very meaningful.
Right. Wow.
And one of the cases that we look at in the film is this man. He came with me to Sedona actually for the opening of the film. Mm-hmm. But he has a glioblastoma, which basically had him completely incapacitated. He was paralyzed, unable to get out of his bed, unable to speak. And a lot of that was from the injury of the chemo medications he was on as well.
Yeah.
And he finally said, enough of this, I'm looking for another way. He went to see the Banerjees. They started him on their protocols. And the man is walking, talking, speaking to as many people as he can to share what to him has been a total miracle of a medicine.
I think I met him in Arizona when you came, right?
Yeah, I think you did meet him.
Yeah, well, great person.
Mm-hmm. So, there's beautiful case studies in the film.
Yeah, amazing. So one thing that, you're talking about the complete skeptics up to the point of being willing to lie about everything you were saying, but the natural skepticism that you had too, it's like real science, which is almost totally forgotten in the world now, is the idea of complete skepticism and complete open-mindedness at the same time, so that you're willing to look at anything just to find out what's true, even if it contradicts what you believe, because you don't care about that. There's no ego in it. It's just to find out whatever's really happening. And now science has been degraded so much to be repeating acceptable information. Whether it's true is irrelevant. It's just whether it's acceptable to the people that are in control. And you're kind of holding on to the vestiges of old real science.
Yes.
And bring that back, because if that weren't resisted, it seems like it could have amazing worldwide implications from what you're saying.
I think what's happening in science today, I'm sure you've heard the term scientism.
Yeah, it's a new religion, right?
Yeah, and it's so disheartening to see, you have to look at so much when considering the validity of a study. And just because something was published in a peer-reviewed journal means almost nothing these days.
Yeah.
We've had the editors of some very significant medical journals come out and say 50% of what we publish is rubbish.
Yeah.
And is false. And all kinds of people who've done studies where they submit completely false studies to see what will happen, and they get published.
Yeah, exactly.
So the peer review process isn't necessarily effective. And what people also don't always know is how much pharmaceutical funding goes towards the advertising within those journals.
Yeah.
And so journals are very careful about publishing anything that could
upset their sponsors, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was involved in some of those kind of projects, and I talked with owners of journals off record at their request, and I said, if I had something that worked really well on some supposedly incurable degenerative disease, and I found out how to do it without toxic chemicals, medicine, would you guys publish it? Because it would have this massive benefit to the world. And they said, absolutely not. It would really upset the people that are funding us. And that was, many of them said the same thing. So you're dealing with that.
And it's hard to see, a lot of the research happening in universities is being funded by the pharmaceutical industry. I had a friend in university who was studying an antidepressant, and she found in her research that it had very negative side effects in smokers. Okay. And she was told that if she published her research, she would not gain her PhD. Right. So when you started learning all of that, what you're putting together is these great benefits that you're witnessing firsthand in multiple countries. And then on the other side, you're learning why it's not everywhere. What did you decide to do about it? I think the film is what I decided to do about it. So I'm already a homeopath. I already work with people. And I see daily what homeopathy is capable of. And not just within my practice, but within my colleagues' practices as well. And with, you can do a search on YouTube or on Google, hashtag homeopathy works for me, and you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of videos of people giving their testimonials of how homeopathy changed their lives.
Who does that site come from?
That's, I think that was put together, the campaign was put together by For Homeopathy, or 4-H, which was originally an organization out of the UK. It's an amalgamation of 4 different homeopathic organizations.
Okay.
But it's just a hashtag campaign. So it's
Right.
people all over the world posting with a hashtag so that it's searchable. You'll find it I'm sure, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube.
Does your own practice have a website or anything like that that people can see?
Yeah, so my practice is Riverdale Homeopathy, and the website's
Riverdale. Okay.
riverdalehomeopathy.com. And the film is, the best way to get to it is watch.magicpillsmovie.com.
And that's like a way to watch it streaming, that type of thing?
Yeah, so you can stream it there.
Watch.magicpillsmovie.com. Is there any way to buy it in a hard copy, like a DVD?
The DVD, we're just waiting. I'm just waiting on my web developer to get that up on the website.
Okay.
But I already have the DVDs are ready to go.
Okay, good. And that's on the same website, right?
Yeah.
So watch.magicpillsmovie.com.
Yeah.
And if they stay in touch with that, they'll know when the DVDs come out.
Exactly.
You're practicing in Toronto, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or somewhere near there.
I'm in Toronto.
How is it legally to do that now? What do you have to deal with, and what's it like?
It's not bad here. We're a regulated health profession in Ontario. There are not that many of us, but we, right now with the lockdown, I see patients over Skype, or not over Skype, but, similar type of technology. And half of my patients are all over the world, so it doesn't affect my practice too much.
So if people wanted to see you under those kind of conditions, how would they make an appointment or find out?
They could go to the Riverdale Homeopathy website.
Okay.
And send out an email to there requesting
an appointment. Is that riverdalehomeopathy.com?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And it works pretty well at a distance, I guess, right? You don't have to be in person.
No, I don't have to be in person.
All right. That's neat. And what's it like for practicing homeopathy in other countries like the US and the UK?
It really varies from place to place. UK homeopathy is very popular, even though it's going through a massive attack. The royal family have been users of homeopathy since the time of Queen Victoria. And you can see Queen Elizabeth relies on homeopathy very heavily. She's, I think, she's been in power for the longest of any monarch, I believe.
Yeah.
She treats her dogs with homeopathy. Prince Charles has now become the royal patron of the Faculty of Homeopathy. So Peter Fisher was the physician and homeopath to the royal family until around 2 years ago, where he was killed in a bicycling accident.
Wow.
And he, so I don't know who's replaced him, but when he died, he was the head of the Faculty of Homeopathy, and which is a homeopathic association of medical doctors who are also homeopaths. And I think to honor him, Prince Charles gave his royal patronage to the organization. So the UK
is where it started too, right?
It started in Germany.
Germany, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it well accepted in Germany then too still?
Again, same story. Even 10 years ago, it was very well accepted in Germany. A lot of medical doctors used it, and there has been a great campaign of disinformation in regards to homeopathy in the media to build distrust, which is starting to take a hold in the country.
And what's it like in the U.S.?
So in the U.S., it's been growing very rapidly, and a few years ago, the FDA commissioned a study to see how big an industry it was, and they found it was an over $1 billion industry in the U.S., and that's when it seems that they really started to try to shut it down, like start the process of maybe writing legislation to reduce access to homeopathy.
Yeah, because that could be a noticeable competitor, I guess, right, at that size. And what's the situation if people want to go to a school to learn it and get certified to practice? Yeah,
there's still some excellent schools to study in the U.S. So that's not a prohibitive problem as of yet. But should homeopathic remedies become difficult to get, that kind of changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, if they succeed in defining them as drugs, then I think it's a problem, right?
So I'd love to tell your audience, if that's okay, about a petition or letters to the FDA that we're encouraging people to write. And there's an organization of mothers that formed for this very specific campaign, and they're called Americans for Homeopathy Choice. And they're not homeopaths, they're mothers who themselves have really depended on homeopathy for their health of their families.
Okay.
And they have a campaign. If you go to homeopathychoice.org or .com, if you just Google it, you'll find it. You can click on their main page and they'll take you to a whole process, which very quickly, it takes about 5 minutes, helps you write a letter to the FDA asking that they rethink this draft guidance document. And lots of information on their website around the ramifications and implications of this document.
Okay, neat. So you're busy with your practice at this point. Do you see doing any other big projects of any kind to further promote it, or are you pretty much settled into promoting the movie, waiting for the DVDs to come out that hopefully everybody will get, and then keeping the practice going, including distance practice, even if they let people go back to face-to-face meetings, which the authorities would prefer that never happens. But if it does, you'd probably still keep up the online meetings, I would imagine, right, for the people that can't come.
Yeah, I've been doing that for years. It's nicer to see people in person, but it's certainly very effective. And with the technology we have today, you can see people face to face even at a distance. So it's I find it works.
So if you get a new client, what do they expect? I mean, how much time do you put into it? What do? Do you take the history, and what's a typical appointment like? Yeah,
so if someone's coming to me for a chronic condition, what we call constitutional treatment, I would sit with them for 2 hours and take their full case history. And people say it feels like going to a therapist, because I want to understand the mental, the physical, the emotional history, the aspects, how a person interprets the world and reacts to their world. And that it's very holistic in that way, because 10 people could go through the same life experience and they all come out of it very differently. Right. And they'll all have a very different takeaway. And my goal is to understand the individual aspects of that person that I can match to a remedy.
Yeah.
So that's usually a couple hours for me. I know other homeopaths will see a patient in an hour and feel that that's sufficient. There's different ways of practicing. And then I usually take some time to work on the case as well. So another hour or so to do my research. And then I get back to them with a remedy and ask for a follow-up in about a month usually.
Okay, and a follow-up in a month, where you tell them what you're suggesting to do?
So I tell them what I suggest beforehand, and then I ask to see them in a month. It depends on the person and how we're giving the remedy and the pathology.
Right.
So it could be very different depending on the intensity of what a person is dealing with. But then we need follow-ups to see that the potency is correct, that the remedy is correct.
Okay.
Because we're all human, and maybe I didn't give you the right remedy, or I didn't give it to you in a way that is ideal for your body.
Right. So does it turn into an ongoing periodic meeting, or is it usually done after a couple of times, or how does that go?
Really depends on the person, on what we're dealing with. So it can be a few years. It can be, you feel better, come see me when you need me, like when you go to the doctor.
Right.
Some people feel their life is much better after a couple of appointments, and then they don't really need to continue so regularly. Other people with really deep chronic conditions, it takes more time. So it's all also individual.
Right.
Yeah.
What about if you find in the interview where you're getting to know the patient and what's happening on all the levels, if you notice things that they're doing in their everyday lifestyle or addictions or things like that that are hurting them, do you address that too, or just the remedy that you come up with?
Yeah, we absolutely address that. So we call those things obstacles to cure.
Okay.
But for example, if someone has addiction, you can't just say, just stop doing that.
Don't do the addiction anymore.
Yeah. So the goal is to also find a homeopathic remedy that will help lessen the need for that addiction.
Exactly. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Neat. So it really sounds from what you're saying like homeopathy combined with this kind of counseling that you just mentioned about upgrading lifestyles where necessary and things like that, that has tremendous potential, and it could be useful for most people's situations.
I absolutely think so. And I think it can be excellent for preventative health as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it works really beautifully with other health modalities. I work with 2 psychotherapists, and it's really interesting to see how the 2 coalesce so beautifully together.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I've worked with acupuncturists, people doing work like bioresonance. I think, there's so many areas of our life where we really look at having a team of people working together. Mm-hmm. And I think health can really be one of those, because it's so multidimensional. You want to take care of your mental health, your physical health, your diet, your energetic state, your spiritual state. All of that is, it's holistic medicine, and all of that feeds your body, your mind, and your soul. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that was recognized from even earlier allopathic doctors, and the Merck manual used to include getting the colon cleaned out and balanced for treating schizophrenia. And then it was taken out. I don't know when it was taken out, maybe the 70s or something, or maybe later, and now it's replaced with drugs. But originally they understood exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like the idea that nutrition has no effect on your physical health, which sometimes you hear from the medical profession, just doesn't make any sense on any level.
That's why when you're right after surgery, you can have junk food and GMOs.
Right. Or, right after your chemotherapy, they give you sugar to help you with your blood sugar. It's ridiculous. And all you need to do is learn some very basic biochemistry to see that basic nutrients and not so basic nutrients are required for the basic chemicals and physiological processes.
I think they're counting on the idea that nobody's going to take the trouble to do that. But,
right. But you'd think our doctors are doing that.
Yeah. That's an interesting psychological question, because if the doctor is giving a remedy that they actually know is not good for people, and they're not a malevolent person, What is it that makes them keep doing that? Is it the subconscious knowledge that if they rebel against it, they lose their income?
I think there's many different things that happen to people. I think many of them really do believe that the drugs they're giving are benefiting people, and I think sometimes they really are. I think there's a time and place sometimes for that. But I mean, in the case, can't talk about vaccines, so I need to give another example, but I think sometimes people don't want to admit there's a confirmation bias, and they don't want to admit that their whole foundation of knowledge may be flawed. And
that would be disturbing, I guess, right?
Yeah.
After decades of training.
And I think that's an aspect to what, like the pseudo-skeptic or the professional skeptic. They live in a very mechanized world view. And if you suddenly throw a wrench in that, where's their foundation to what they understand as reality? Yeah,
exactly. That can be very disorienting.
Yeah. So I think most physicians are very well-meaning and are wanting to do the best for their patients, but they're in a limited paradigm with a level of education and knowledge that has been produced by the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. And they're working with their evidence base, which we know is greatly skewed in many ways.
All comes down to the definition of evidence, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, there's so many problems, and many physicians do recognize this. And there are many physicians who are also scared to speak up.
Oh, yeah. And there's some that weren't scared that don't exist in a physical body anymore.
Right.
So it's justified.
Yeah. And, should a physician stand up and have an opposing view to the publicly accepted narrative, they can lose their license, they're investigated, they're discredited. So it takes a lot of courage to stand up to that once you recognize some of the limitations with what you're dealing with.
People have this idea that licenses give you more freedom, and it's actually the opposite. It's a strong control mechanism.
As I can tell you, for all the ways I've been censored from speaking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how are you educating people now besides the movie through any, social media channels or anything like that?
Yeah, so we do have our social media on Facebook, which is Magic Pills Movie, and same on Instagram. We also have our mailing list where we try to give lots of great information, let people know when there's health advocacy work to be done. We have a great blog that's growing. Where we've published lots of scientific literature, updates on what's going on around the world in terms of different campaigns. We talk about the research that's being done. There is a very fraudulent study out of Australia that's being used as the pivotal study that proves that homeopathy doesn't work. Okay. And yet the science is so weak. Later we found that they had commissioned a first study, which actually showed that there was very promising evidence for homeopathy. That study was buried.
How can you prove a negative that something absolutely doesn't work? How did they manage to do that?
Yeah, it's pretty, their methodology was just so corrupt. But they claim to have looked at 1,800 studies. And my understanding from some reading I was doing is that they were looking at, for example, this is totally hypothetical. This isn't from the actual study, but just to lay an example, let's look at the effectiveness of homeopathy in knee pain. Okay. And so they looked at 4 different studies. 2 of them were positive, 2 of them are negative. They wipe each other out, therefore homeopathy doesn't work.
Okay, got it.
Which is ridiculous methodology. It's like, also they'd look at things like for example, you can say, take a study for headaches and you look at a study that looks at aspirin for headaches, one that looks at Advil for headaches, one that looks at, I don't know, whether, Tylenol for headaches, and I don't know, one other, Celebrex, let's say. And then let's say the Advil and the Tylenol come up positive, and the Celebrex and the Advil are negative. So they cancel each other out, and therefore allopathic medicine doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't think that one gets published.
No, and it didn't get published, actually. The study did not make it through peer review, and yes, it's still being upheld by governments all over the world for why we're reducing access to homeopathy.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I have a great article about that on the blog, which was also published at GreedMedInfo and the Epoch Times. So there's lots of great information there. And really, I encourage people to join the mailing list because that's how we're building our grassroots.
Right. And how do they get on that list?
They can go to that same website or to our main site, which is magicpillsmovie.com, and sign up right there and then.
Okay, now magicpillsmovie.com, is that different than watch.magicpillsmovie.com?
So Watch is the new is a new URL where we actually have the film for sale.
Okay.
But they all connect to each other.
Okay.
So you can sign up at either one of those.
Okay, neat. So what have we not covered that's important for people to know about all this thing?
Oh, I feel like we've been all over the place. If people are really interested in delving into the science, I'd recommend going and Googling the Homeopathic Research Institute.
Okay.
Or searching on a non-Google search engine.
Homeopathic Research Institute, did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
HRI is the acronym. And they're an organization of scientists who are funding and recording and building the scientific literature and the evidence base for homeopathy.
All right.
And there's so many excellent resources on that page that really explain where the science is at now, what are the studies saying, where are the highest quality studies, and they have databases available to the thousands and thousands of studies that have been done in this area.
Do they have a primary journal that is the one they use, or all kinds of them?
No, they work with all kinds of journals.
Okay. Great. Well, I would think some people would want to get in touch with you, and everybody should want to get on your mailing list right away, and just support what you were doing, because before 1910 in the U.S., there was more of a free market in healthcare and therapists and practitioners of different kinds, and it'd be nice to have that come back to whatever degree is possible. And I would think the same thing in Canada and everywhere else too.
Yeah, actually, speaking of 1910 and the situation we're in now, when we look at the Spanish flu and the use of homeopathy in those times, we have incredible data.
Well, do you want to mention how that was used at that time? Because I don't think most people have any idea about that.
Yeah, well, in that time, homeopathy was very popular and very widely used. There were homeopathic physicians in the military. There were homeopathic hospitals across North America and Europe. That
was like 1918 or something when that flu was happening, right?
Right. So 1917, 1918, or was it 1918, 1919? And we have so much data from hospitals and from specific physicians, particularly military physicians who were seeing a lot of cases. And the mortality rate across the board was 0.7% for homeopaths.
Wow.
And in the treatment of pneumonia as well, 0.7% mortality
compared
rate.
To what?
Compared to, I think it was like between 3 to 7%. I think pregnant women had a very high mortality rate.
Yeah, I think with the Spanish flu, it was like at least 10 from what I heard.
But I think the standard mortality rate, where I have a really great article on my blog, which was a study of all this data compiled by a brilliant homeopath and naturopath from Montreal, whose name is André Sen. So he put a lot of work into this. It is on our blog. And we have books. We have several books written on the subject matter. And if in Andre's work, he compares our effectiveness in the treatment of pneumonia compared to the treatment of pneumonia today with all the scientific discoveries and antibiotics and tools that we have. Homeopathy still outperforms allopathy today.
Where can people get those books?
There are, I'm sure you can search them online. We have Riverdale Homeopathy sells some of books, so you can check out our bookstore. Whole Health Now as well. But one of them, it was written by Sandra Perko. And there was one more. I can't remember who wrote the other book, though.
But some of them can be accessed through your site, I guess, right?
At Riverdale Homeopathy.
Okay, neat.
Yeah.
Well, I hope things really open up for homeopathy in general, and, the message of the movie gets to the rest of the world really well.
Thank you.
If there's any, further episodes to this whole adventure of getting it out there that would be of any use to you to be back, feel free to come and do a sequel.
That would be great, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be nice. Okay, so hold on and we'll say goodbye in the break here. And this gives people a lot of homework to start getting into. That was Ananda More, you guys, and I thought that was a great show. And again, feel really fortunate to be in a front row seat here to learn from people like that. All she's talking about is one form of what's actual medicine that, amazingly enough, doesn't hurt you, which is what Hippocrates brought up. That was the central element of medicine. It was like the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. The first thing that Hippocrates wanted to say is he said, first, do no harm, like not any. I think we mentioned that during the talk tonight. And homeopathy fits in that category. There's massive reports of it helping people with all kinds of situations, which is in the movie, by the way. It's a really good movie. I saw it. And you can see the movie, as Ananda said, at watch.magicpillsmovie.com. And I guess you can go there and stream it live, or stream it on demand, I should say. And then magicpillsmovie.com, without the watch part, also has information on it. And also, so does Riverdale, Riverdale, homeopathy.com, which I think is the site for Ananda's private homeopathy practice, which he's actually allowed to have in Canada. Sounded really useful to me. I don't know what she charges. You'll have to find out. But if you can do an appointment with her and you have anything that you need to work on, it sounds like that would be personalized and very educational as well. And also, she said to get on the mailing list. And I asked her to put a list of homeopathy books on that are good to read. And I think that she said one of those two sites gets you on the mailing list. And there's going to be a guidebook that comes out, which she said comes from magicpillsmovie.com. That'll be a PDF, and that's supposed to be on there pretty soon. So watch for that. Again, I urge you to see the movie and get familiar with the work of Americans for Homeopathy Choice, which is homeopathychoice.org. I haven't gone there yet, but sounds like an important website. What else? I just think Ananda's doing really valuable work, and stay in touch with it. It's part of this whole freedom issue that we're all working on now. In the meantime, watch for the other guest shows that we have on Sunday show, and we have a show that's usually related to current events called Lost Arts Radio Live. It's on Saturdays at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern Time. And lots of interesting stuff on that show. It's not banned yet, which is a big plus. And even if it does get banned on the major platforms, it'll still be on Brighteon.com and a bunch of others. And you can stay up to date with those by going to lostartsradio.com and get on our mailing list, because if we can't get information to you any other way, we'll take that list that's being formed now and send out whatever written or video information we can if you're interested in that. It's free, no charge involved. info@lostartsradio.com. Send your name and email address, and we'll put you on that list so that you'll be able to stay in touch if we disappear. And what else? LostArtsRadio.com has a donate button if you want to help us stay on air and be able to do our other educational projects. We'd really appreciate that. There's also a donate button at LostArtsResearchInstitute.org. Those work, and they're instant ways to contribute to help supporting what we're doing if you want to do that. We also have a Subscribestar page, subscribestar.com/LostArtsRadio, where there are different levels that you can look at that are, they have rewards for them, and you can see what those are. Also, it's a good idea to subscribe to us on Brighteon.com, which is brighteon.com/channel/LostArtsRadio. And you can always send in comments, suggestions, questions to us at richard@lostartsradio.com or doug@lostartsradio.com, and we'll answer usually pretty quickly as soon as we can. And if you want to get more deeply into the interactive program that we meet in live every week, that's at planetaryhealingclub.com. planetaryhealingclub.com is the access portal to that. And that's where we talk about ancient health information updated to use in current environments and situations. And it's just for people that want to transform the quality of life and become as conscious and fully functional as possible. Everything that affects that can be openly talked about there, and we can share very valuable tools and information that we don't talk about much on the public platforms because they would be in danger of disappearing right away. That's at planetaryhealingclub.com. Any questions, again, write to myself or Doug, and we'll be glad to answer. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you. We've got great shows coming up in the weeks to come. Give us your feedback if you want to, and stay in touch. Take good care of yourself. That's what this is for, is to try to give you tools and information that you can do that more effectively and have a lot better quality of life yourself, but also contribute a lot more to whatever way that you're interacting with the rest of the world, your own family, friends, people at work. You can transform all those relationships by what you do internally in yourself and getting back your real health and the information that's been violently suppressed in the U.S. and other places for a long time. We want the antidote for that, and I don't think it's too late to change the situation that is developing in the outside world. It doesn't have to run its course. We have better options. So anyway, thanks for spending the time with us tonight. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you at the next show.
Introducing Lost Arts Radio on Subscribestar.com. Just go to subscribestar.com/LostArtsRadio to find our rewards program, offering 10 different giving levels starting at just $5 a month. We offer incredible value for any rewards level, from extra monthly interview videos not available publicly to subscription-based Planetary Healing Club videos once, twice, or 3 times a month, to private counseling sessions with Lost Arts Radio host Richard Sachs, to tech help with me, Doug Diamond. We even have one option where you can be the star on Lost Arts Radio as our guest on a specially produced show just for you. We conduct an interview with you and broadcast it to our growing network and listenership. Our Subscribestar levels are one of a kind and offer great rewards for any budget. Please help support Lost Arts Radio. We can't do it without you. With increasing censorship on many of our channels, we really need your support today to keep doing what we're doing. As Richard says, we're not even at survival level yet. Lost Arts Radio has 3 weekly shows. Lost Arts Radio Live each Saturday night at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, which is a live stream currently on multiple platforms in case we get banned from some of the larger ones. Right now, we're on 2 YouTube channels, Facebook Live, Periscope, which is Twitter, Twitch, and DLive. You can access these broadcasts by going to www.lostartsradio.com/live. for all the links to those channels. The Planetary Healing Club meets right after Lost Arts Radio Live at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Saturday nights. And our Sunday show with guests airs at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Sunday nights on our Blog Talk Radio channel, our YouTube channels, Facebook pages, and on Brighteon. Be sure to sign up for our free email list just in case we do get banned on big tech's platforms. It's just a matter of time, really. They don't like the stuff we talk about, and they do not want the truth out there. In fact, they have already attacked us numerous times. Join our free email list so we can let you know where we are and how to access our shows. The sign-up button is right on the top right on most pages of our website. The best starting point for all things Lost Arts Radio is our main site, lostartsradio.com, where you can find the hottest news selection videos that we curate just for you. Those are on the homepage and added to daily, as well as articles and breaking news about information you really need to know. Our show archives, the 10 most recent shows, are right on our homepage, as well as our Blog Talk Radio page at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, or just click the All Things Radio Show tab right on our website. We're in the podcast directory on iTunes, and all of our shows except the banned ones are on our YouTube channels at Lost Arts Radio and at Diamond Disc. Our Brighteon page is really taking off, and we often have editors' picks videos right on their homepage. Visit brighteon.com/channel/LostArtsRadio. On our site, you can also access our free listener forum as well as sign up for the Planetary Healing Club, which is just $25 a month, where you get private access to a one-on-one interaction with host Richard Sachs and myself and the other club members who participate live. More info can be found at planetaryhealingclub.com. We're providing solutions in there to make the world a better place. Come join us. Stay tuned, because up next, you'll get to hear a really great song by an independent artist that we're doing our best to support. Go to lostartsradio.com/music for the full list of all the great songs and bands that we spin on our audio-only podcast shows. If you're in a band and want to submit a song for consideration for airplay on Lost Arts Radio, visit my website at diamonddiscaudio.com for more information about the music placement, mastering, and mixing work that I do. Thanks again for listening to and supporting Lost Arts Radio. We love having you as part of our family to learn, experience, and grow with.
See how when you hold me, how gently I unfold. See how you can really just open me wide. See how my heart shatters, how easy it is to break. Careful now, can you feel the ground? It is beginning to shake. Pry me away, hey, 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 yeah. Pry me away, hey, yeah, yeah. Pry me away, hey, 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 yeah. You can, I don't think you can. Feel how cold the air can be, how he can be lost so quickly through the window of opportunity, just like a draft in the night. See how words can twist and hands can ring like phones inside empty homes when nobody's there to hear. Oh, do you hear me, dear? Black and blue. There are more than two colors to be here, and this history won't make me can. Friendly, just open me wide.